Hello, everyone, and welcome to Twilight Epiphanies Talk Radio with Cindy Magnetism, and the show is about to begin. So, slow down, take a seat, put your feet up, and maybe take some notes, because this show is about you, it's for you, and it is designed to help you receive exactly what you need to be a happier and healthier you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 29th episode of Twilight Epiphanies Radio and the 7th show in this series, the Twilight Epiphanies Honor Roll Series. Tonight, I have the pleasure of honoring Santos Bonacci, also known to us as Mr. Astrotheology. So here across the ethers, I have the opportunity to give a personal thank you to Santos from the many of us who have benefited beyond ways that I could give proper description to through the exceptionally detailed and accurate work Santos has put together in what he terms syncretism. For over 30 years already, Santos has researched and translated ancient texts, utilizing etymology and the stories within myths, fairy tales, religious doctrines, and his in-depth understanding of astrology to correlate the interconnectedness of all these stories, tracing them back to their original source. He has provided us with his esoteric understandings of the hidden teachings within all of these external storylines that truly are meant to bring one's focus within, into our own inner terrain, where there the opportunity awaits to discover the energetic process of raising the inner chrism oil to the crown chakra, a process that is universal. Santos has brought his work to the world at large through countless lectures, workshops, webinars, and seminars. I personally have fond memories of taking my laptop outside onto my balcony and listening to hours of his videos until I fell asleep under the night sky. I explored his work for what it provided me in confirmation of my inner notions in earlier years that questioned the indoctrinating pressures that organizations placed on interpreting these ancient scripts according to their external divergences. His work gave credence to my intuition, while I saw clearly how his information, as he puts it, broke the fictions of religion, and it gave me an immediate sense of truth that rang in my memory. Santos gives us clear, informed research as to how, in his own words here, ruling families created counterfeit philosophical organizations, corporate religions, and churches to replace the three branches of philosophy, logic, ethics, and physics, with dogma and doctrine, fear, superstition, and ignorance, while these elite oligarchies, through their religious, political, monetary, and corporate institutions, have been suppressing the true religion science that was bequeathed to us by more advanced civilizations such as Egypt, Babylon, Persia, India, and Greece. Santos brings us the science of the stars and soul. I would like to open up with a beautiful quote from Santos. The underlying message of all the legendary books of mythology, including the Bible, is one and the same. Nature, the only book of God in all her naked glory, is revealed to the ones that have eyes to see. The recurring cycles of nature are the basis of all the stories. And with that, let's open up the mic and say hello to Santos. Hello, Santos.
Hello, Cindy. How are you? Thank you for that.
You are very
Lovely
welcome.
Introduction. Yeah.
Okay. And so tonight here, Santos, you are a man of infinite wisdom, knowledge, intellect, understanding here. And I would very much enjoy starting the show with getting to know the Santos as a young child and beginning his journey into what has brought you to your work today. So as a child, what were your influences that brought you to this work? And as you moved through following those impulses, what were the perhaps highlights that ignited your passions for this work? Did you start very young? Did you know very young? So kind of what were some of the highlights that bring you here tonight, starting as a child?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Australia, Victoria, country boy. My parents were both from Calabria, southernmost province of Italy. In 56, I was born in 63, baptized Catholic, very young age, of course. Shortly thereafter, my parents became Jehovah's Witnesses. They were seduced by the Rockefeller Mind Control Institute, Russell Trust, and so they raised all the children as Jehovah's Witnesses. So I thought, in hindsight, I think that was a good thing for me because it gave me a spiritual groundwork. Even though it was mind control, it was the Bible, and I got to know the Bible. So I thought that was good, but I grew up unusual in that sense, in that I was Italian and a Jehovah's Witness. So I had two things that stigmatized me and traumatized me when I was young, having to deal with the ridicule of being, let's say, ethnic. That's different, especially when young children in Australia were sort of very cautious and afraid of immigration. So that was understandable. Then I had the Jehovah's Witness stigma as well. So in my teens, I started rejecting the what I learned, or the Jehovah's Witnesses at least, and I just did the usual worldly things, what you would call worldly things. So yeah, chasing girls, discovering cannabis, all those usual things really. Nothing quite unusual in my life at all. You know, it was very what you would say common, just an ordinary life. The only thing that separates me from anyone else that would be unusual would be the fact that I was bilingual, and a Jehovah's Witness. Those two things set the groundwork, I think, for the syncretism to come later, because I can remember being very zealous when I was young, and I used to defend the Bible, and I did it very well, and I used to sometimes get beaten up for it and come under a lot of ridicule. And I do remember in 1974, I was laying bets with some of my cousins that the world would end because the Jehovah's Witnesses said that 75 would be the 6,000 years culmination of time since Adam and Eve, yada, yada, yada. And so they concluded, they made a calculation that the world would end, and it didn't. So I remember clearly the first days of January 1975, pocket full of coins, paying all my cousins out. Yep, world didn't end. Here you go, $2 for you, 10 for you. So that sort of gives you a bit of a snapshot of the kind of individual I was and still am today. You know, I'm still waiting for Armageddon and the tribulation to come about and for the Gotadamaroon to settle all accounts with and establish the rest of God, which is what we call paradise, etc. So I'm still doing that because the theme, the motifs are the same. I haven't changed any of the spiritual concepts. Just I've come to know the truth of them now. And so rather than waiting for an Armageddon by an interventional bearded male God, male-only God, now I see it as it's what will happen is the universe is an electromagnetic conscious being which records all of our actions, and the consequences of evil actions is what we call the Gotterdammerung, the Armageddon, and the meltdown, of the evil and sort of coming, doing the accounts, the ledger, and finding who is worthy of going to a better world. So anyway, I'll just go back to my youth. So I did the teen years. When I came to my later teens, at 18, my father bought a restaurant for me and my sister to manage. So we went straight into business. And because of the responsibility of running a restaurant at the age of 18, there was a bit of a shift inside of me where I started to realize the vanity of just living a flippant life, and I wanted to be devoted to spirituality. So I defaulted to the religion I knew, which was Jehovah's Witnesses, unfortunately. But a lot of good came from it. And the good that came from it was that I was a very, very studious individual, and I really wanted to know the truth. I wasn't going to be messed about with, just lies, even though I supported the Witnesses for 25 years after that, and which is a lying organisation. So it's all about mind control and programming and being fooled by the many, 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 many manifold layers of lies in this system, which I've exposed and uncovered. Mm-hmm. So, especially this religious one, I've uncovered that religion is nothing but science, electromagnetic science. It can only be that because there is only electromagnetism in the universe as the manifest energy from the Creator. That's how the Creator makes things. Everything is electromagnetic. The torus field, the atom, the sine wave, and everything I teach in all religions all go back to energy, the atom, the torus field, and electromagnetic, dielectric field, energy, which we call God, due to our lack of being expanded in consciousness, I think. So what I did was, that would have been 1982. So that's the beginning of my journey, really, as an adult, and trying to syncretize everything. I never, ever rested until I could work things out. So in 1983, just a year in, I bumped into an older sister in the congregation, and she said she realized that I was studious and was a real truth seeker, not like 90% of all so-called Christians in all denominations. And she pulled me aside and she said, listen, under her breath, because you don't want to talk about things like this too loudly, other brothers will get stumbled. But she said to me, you need to study a book called Secrets of the Lost Races by Rein Norbergen. And it's at the Albury Library. Albury's in New South Wales, just over the border where I was living in Victoria running the restaurant. So diligent me, the next day I went to the library and I got that book and read it within days. And in there, Rein Norbergen explains how prior to some flood that came to this earth in our recent history, not so long ago, there were what scientists and archaeologists called advanced technology, which they call OOP parts. Oops, we were not supposed to find a Baghdad battery or an anti-cathera mechanism or electrical devices and all kinds of advanced technology found when archaeologists do their digs, and then the Jesuits come along and cover it up. So that got me started on my path, and I ordered many, many books. Another one was The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop, which I cut my teeth in astro. That's what I say, where I say I cut my teeth in astrotheology, because because even though hang on, someone's calling me on Skype. Right, so even though Alexander Hislop was an Anglican bishop and defending Christianity from the literalist paradigm, which I expose as totally fraudulent and a Roman invention, he taught me how to go to all the ancient languages and all the ancient books, such as Srimad Bhagavatam, or the Vedas, and all the ancient documents, and syncretize words. So he showed how, for instance, the Ram concept comes from Brahma, the Rama, Sri Ram in the Hindu, and so he shows how that lamb concept is in India, Persia, and everywhere. And Egypt, you see Amun-Ra, the ram-headed god. And so I started paying attention with these truths, in which he was calling all of this demon worship, all of this syncretism, and all the Hindu religion, and anything that's not Christian, of course, it's from demons, and and it's to be shunned. But of course, they can go in there and have a look at how they all seem to mimic the Bible. They call it diabolical mimicry, where the Son of God, which is a motif in all religions and also in Christianity, how the devil went around all over the world and started making religions where the Son of God would be the Saviour of the world, just to mislead people, so that when the true Son of God comes along, the Christian one, then they would have reason to not believe in this version of the Son of God. So that was a great place to cut my teeth. There are many other books I could mention. I studied Asimov and his etymology, and I continued to study and learn about syncretism, astrology as well. I was learning astrology. And so in 2005, I realized that the Jehovah's Witnesses was just a commercial enterprise. It's just an enterprise, really. And I woke up, and so I left them. And then for a couple of years, I was in a kind of a limbo where nothing was going anywhere spiritually. So in 2007, a friend of mine, I was playing music in Melbourne. I play at a mall, used to play at the centre, at the heart of the city, and sell my CDs, busking, street performing. And one of my good friends there is working at an electrical store. I went to visit him to get some components for my PA. I was performing. And there was a television screen showing these beautiful mansions on the Rhine River. And I said, wow, look at that. And he says, yeah, that's probably just another Rothschild mansion. And the bells, it pricked my attention. And I said, yeah, Rothschild, yeah, the bankers, yeah. He goes, yeah, oh yeah. He says, they're behind everything. They're behind the Federal Reserve, they're behind all the wars, all the bloodshed, all the crime, drug running, people trafficking, pornography with the Vatican and all these rich families. And that was it. I knew this was true, because when I was in America in 2011, in November 2000, on the 11th of November 2011, exactly 2 months after 9/11, I was performing in Las Vegas at the MGM Grand Arena for the Bill Gates keynote opening address at Comdex, which is now a defunct IT expo. It was the biggest in the world at the time. And I did a 45-minute set with my partner there, duo, and we played just instrumental guitar and opened, and then we walked off the stage, and there's Bill Gates. He does his keynote address, and on that night he actually Microsoft released Xbox. That was the historical Xbox. Anyway, so for a week after, I was playing every day there at Expo, and this Canadian Greek guy approached me, and he started telling me how 9/11 was all orchestrated by the American corrupt government, the CIA, Mossad, etc. And I was a Jehovah's Witness back then, of course, a good, zealous Jehovah's Witness. And I didn't disagree at all. I just listened to the guy, and I accepted it and agreed. And I thought, yep, that's plausible. That's very plausible for me. I'm sure the government, I mean, here I am, a Jehovah's Witness, knocking on people's doors, condemning the beast and the harlot, who are the governments and the religions of the world, polluting the world. So that was okay. I thought, yep, no worries. But I didn't really do much. I don't remember much thinking about that at all up until 2007. So this guy, Gareth, my friend, he puts me onto a book dealing with the Rothschilds. I forget the name of the book now. I'm so embarrassed because that's the book that really woke me up. And by a guy called, I think it's David Carrington something. He's got 3 names to his name. And I'll try to remember that book by the end of the show. Anyway, I read that book, and then away I was. I was on Amazon ordering all kinds of books. And then I started putting everything together, the astrotheology as well, and the lies in religion, not just politically, geopolitically and historically, the lies in everything, medicine, our education system, our cosmology as well. Now I know the true cosmology. I mean, back then, of course, I was teaching a Copernican Jesuit satanic model, which is absolutely an insanity. It's totally demonic. And so now I've got all the pieces of syncretism all correctly. I have even exposed how the false model has been implemented by the Jesuits. Copernican was a Jesuit, so was Galileo Galilei. And they devised a system to pull us away from astrology and its true geocentric power. And so I am a vegetarian geocentric astrologer. This is very, very important because I've declared in all my presentations that Copernican heliocentric flesh-eating astrologers are all Satanists, and that's why they look like they worship Satan, and it's all by design. It's to put people off astrology. You see, when they look at those ads with those haggard-looking witches claiming to be astrologers, whereas they look like drug addicts, alcoholics, demonized, they look like criminals, and they're offering horoscope services, and they're not even vegetarian, nor do they promote that all astrology is a vegetarian science. See the work of the greatest astrologer who ever lived, Porphyry, who condemned the flesh-eating astrologers. So syncretism all fell into place, and there were 4 years there, from 2007 to 2011, where I was getting frustrated because I was watching all of these guys, of course, as you do, all the guys who were claiming to be astrotheologists and geopolitical, etc., trying to teach the truth. And they were all good. Everyone had their little pieces of the puzzle. But no one, all the pieces, can put them all together, the jigsaw puzzle, properly and correctly, as we should be able to do, because we are intelligent beings. And so my intelligence was being offended by what I saw as just the inability of people just to see the whole picture. For some reason, I could take a high, very, very overarching perspective over what was going on in all fields of the world as we know it, education, medical, etc. And so my frustration caused me to start making videos. Now, I didn't have any skill at speaking to audiences except for what I learned by the Jehovah's Witnesses, public speaking. That was good. I did learn quite a bit. And I suppose my musical, entertaining aspect comes into it as well. I don't know, but I put mustered everything that I had together and started making some very amateur presentations where I just would invite friends over to my place, film it, teach them astrotheology, record it, and if it was good enough, I would put it online. And so I did that driven by two things: frustration at the lack of good, proper syncretism and knowledge out there, and my love for the truth, and my continued battle that I have. My war is a spiritual war, and I've always tried to be on the path of truth, the right-hand path of purity. I'm not saying I'm some pure guru or anything like that. I'm just an ordinary guy, and I've got a lot of failings, and which do bring me a lot of heartache personally as well, because I would love to be a much better human than I am, and I'd love to be perfected in everything, which I'm not. And so, but my understanding is, as long as I stay on this path of purity and continue, all truth will come to me, because all truth is available, and I will purify myself, and eventually I will get to where I want to go, no matter how many lifetimes it takes. So I'm sharing this syncretism with the world, Cindy, and that's all I do. I try not to divert any other energy to any other activities other than helping people to break free from the institutional lies which has damaged them severely, and most people don't even know how damaged they are, but you can see how damaged they are because of all the, just look at how sick people are these days, how out of shape they are, how many people are dying of all manner of strange and unusual diseases and rubbish and stuff, and all the medications that they are on. I used to find that it was interesting how many people were on medications in the Jehovah's Witnesses, especially depression. Mm-hmm. I thought that used to really, really intrigue me. Nice people, lovely people, truth seekers, they are, but they're deluded. And how many of them were taking antidepressant pills? To the left you'd see a whole bunch of brothers all on antidepressants, to the right, in front, behind, everywhere you go there, And so what I teach now is that God is in nature, so he is natural, and he is supernatural at the same time. And if we study nature, which we have, which in the scriptures is called God's Son, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. What that means is, if you have seen the material manifest atomic world, which was produced by the energy of the sun, which is electricity, electrical energy, then you have seen the Father, which is beyond the manifest physical world and is in counter space. And so this is the mystery of the Father and the Son. I and the Father are one. They are one. So if we understand that the natural world and the supernatural transcendental world are actually one, Kether and Malkuth, then we'll work out what's going on. We have two souls. One is immortal, transcendental, and the other is mortal and subject to what we call sin and death. And these mortal bodies are our personality, our lower ego, which we are transcending. When they talk about killing the ego, it's the lower ego that must be, quote unquote, killed. In the Bible and in all the holy books like the Quran, when they say to kill infidels and to kill Canaanites and dash their children against the crag, it's not literal. It's speaking about killing or doing away with unevolved, immature, childish thoughts, emotions, and rubbish that do not serve us. That's all. That's the only killing we need to go around doing. Killing our lower nature, which is the personality. But we are an individual. Yes, we are. And there's people out there in the legalese world that will say, oh, individe you all. Yes, but it's not a bad word. You know, they treat it as though it's the devil, the word individual. We are individuals. That's how we have been blessed. We are not personalities, you know. We're not, oh, I'm a doctor. Oh, I've got PhDs. I'm an actor. I'm famous in Hollywood. All of those are masks. All of those are personalities. They are all temporal. They are all fleeting. They are all transient. They all are ephemeral and illusionary. The individual is forever. And that is the higher ego, which is the ego of the individual. Now, being individual doesn't mean we've been divided. No. It means we are one with God as we are different to God at all times. We always have been this. And the churches are there to deprive you of this truth. They teach you that you are a worm, a maggot, a useless eater, a sinner. You are going to hell unless you come to this church here and read our books and our doctrines and interpretations and hermeneutics. And, and there's, don't ever think that there's anything divine in you. Don't you dare. That's blasphemy. Well, this is the blasphemy, what they are teaching. They're teaching beautiful sons and children of God that Christ is not in them. And yet the scriptures are full of verses where it teaches clearly. Colossians 1:27, Christ who dwells in you, the indwelling Christ. And they are denying this one. So in other words, they're denying their individuality, and they are continuing to live a sinful life in blessed ignorance in their personalities. Doctors, army soldiers, nurses, career nurse, and all of these are nothing. All of these are just services that we do while we are temporarily breathing on this plane before we leave and go back to our unconditioned, unlimited, unqualified, true, godlike, individual natures. So I did go from when I was young to where I am now, and really missed a lot of little bits in between, but showing you how I'm still the same. I am exactly the same individual that I set on that path when I was a young child, and that is to absolutely bring universal truth, because there is only truth, to the delusionalists who continue declaring that there is no truth. Pure leftist Marxist, Bolshevik, communist BS. That is their invention. There is no truth. And people, you'd be surprised how many people are out there who are quite well known all around the world as being truthers that preach that rubbish, that there is no truth, you know. So
I understand.
I'm here.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you. I understand, you know, the expression of where you are coming from, and it's difficult, perhaps, say someone who is still working within these structures that, you know, you described, and they haven't been able to come to that site yet, an understanding within them that there is a difference between what, and I do agree with you 100%, a true God spaces within us and practicing that as opposed to what has been overlaid in all these indoctrinated programs. So I can feel very much for your thoughts about how difficult it is to observe so many people who would have good intentions but don't understand that when they're sometimes adhering to certain programs and they're benefiting on levels that they relate to, but at the same time it's a little bit difficult for, you know, someone like yourself, and I can see the perception. I understand exactly where you're at, and that it's difficult to observe that and know that it's not exactly the path that brings what they are truly seeking or can be seeking. So, you know, for anyone who is here and working back through different steps of their own path, we're all sort of returning and reverse engineering from what has been overlaid on us during this time frame where there's this heavy assertion to also implant us with, you know, as we move on here, concepts that are still diverged from, as you put it, the original one source story. So what I'd kind of like to emphasize in, you know, the beauty of what you have worked on for all of us is that we do need to take, exactly as you said, a very raw look at what are we producing in our actions and the doctrines we're following. Because if you are observing the world properly without eliminating half of what's taking place, which is very dark and sinister and evil and corrupt, etc., you are not fully taking in what is being created here. So, you know, to help you understand, you know, just myself and also in my awakening over 22 years ago, the very first space that I looked into was, how in the world did we get into this? And as I met different people, I remember meeting 5 different people initially as I sort of stepped back into looking at the Bible. I was raised Catholic even up through Catholic high school, and sort of escaped, however, that God's going to punish me kind of a feeling. I guess I figured I was just okay or was raised in a different type family, so I didn't get indoctrinated with the fear of God. But 5 people were literally utilizing the Bible information in 5 completely different ways. And I went, wow, well, that each one has just, you know, has their own perspective. And they were still a misuse for what I felt. So when I did, you know, reach your work, and I think, you know, probably at least within the first maybe 10 years of study, at least I definitely reached your work, but I was able to then free myself. I felt like, wow, this man is speaking for me, you know, so speaking for what I feel inside, and how much my heart wanted to express a true love within everything without all this doctrine that was so filled with hate and jealousy and punishment and everything. So I thank you for that and your work in syncretism. It's absolutely amazing. Do I still have you there? Santos, are you still with us?
Yes. Can you hear?
Oh, okay. Yes, you went out for a little while. Were you able to hear what I was finishing up talking on there? Or you just had your mic? Okay, you had your mic
muted. Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So I wasn't sure when I heard that different noise if I should continue. So thank you for that. I have definitely continued to look at the distortions that have been into and overlays and overlays and overlays on this one story that resides within. And so could you tell us, if you were going to summarize the one universal story, even if it has to be a little bit generalized to begin, and you've touched on it already in what you were just talking about, but the one universal story that is the original story that we are working with, whereby all of these different storylines have been created upon the one harmonic story. Can you tell us what that one harmonic story is? And I believe you would start with the atom.
You mean like what's the model archetypal story which has been copied and copied and copied, and which one would you say?
Yes, exactly. Because I feel very, very strongly about people unifying in this. You know, we're very much aware of what the divide and conquer tactics are going on, and they're so pervasive, it's unbelievable right now. And as you stated, so many, spiritual people are also, being deluded, and they're not sometimes even aware that they have diverged from believing in a one truth. There is one true energy story that's taking place, one model. And if we all can understand that no matter how many lifetimes or different timelines have ever taken place, all of these different stories within myths and fairy tales have played out in these different ways. But something that I've noticed in numerology is that when I open up and look at a client's chart and then how they're relating to it, I see an energy story. But the first thing I do with that is ask, how did they get here to this energy story? What are the choices that created this? And very often I find that we first of all need to make a discernment on that energy story, because people have misconceptions and these programs written into the reasons they're experiencing these energy stories. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay, and that's like a primary space for me that I also believe from reading, probably, hundreds, if not thousands of charts already, that I see that they need to first of all ask themselves, how did I create this energy story? Within what archetypal imprint may have been distorted? Because it is just an energy story, but I see where people fell into a distorted story that was sold to them. So say, for instance, and we'll get back to the original model. So say, for instance, in the fairy tales. So the Grimm brothers came along and changed the fairy tales. Well, if you change the stories and people are imprinting different types of conflicts, then the elites come along and they place themselves on both sides of the conflict. And it's a win-win for them. So the degree of conflict, and I think what we've taken on, has been distorted that we believe it has to be so difficult. And it is hard enough. I believe it's difficult enough, but I believe we've taken on layers of extra challenge because of the stories that we have been told. As you said, that a God is, punishing, or that, well, I understand there's a karmic consequences, but there's not a jealous God. There's not, hell has been distorted. Our versions of what hell is, we create our own hell. So those kinds of different conceptions that have been placed on our myths and our storylines. So can you kind of take us from the original story and then take a look outward into what are the significant alterations that have been overlaid that people can identify with and start to reverse engineer.
The original story is how the original story is to be found on in the sine wave or the ecliptic of every energy field. So, energy makes a sine wave. It's a vibration. Goes from its neutral middle, goes up to the wave amplitude, then it goes back to the middle, and then it goes to the other wave amplitude, and then back to the middle. The sine wave. That is the root of every single story, including your life, that has ever occurred in the universe. Now, how we can understand that sine wave is by going to our local marvelous celestial phenomena, the luminary in the sky called the sun. The sun has an ecliptic. It makes a sine wave every year. And it starts at the equinox on March the 24th. So, if you take the sun to be the Son of God, which it is, I know most Christians have no idea of this. This is how much they've been brainwashed. And you begin its sine wave there at the on the ecliptic at the equator at the equinox. Equinox means equal day, equal night. The two equinoxes. And what that means is neutrality. The sun is neutral. It is balanced. It's at the middle of the sine wave. Okay, so from there, at the inertial plane of the sine wave, from there it goes up to the Tropic of Cancer. Just follow the sun. All right, from the equinox in Aries, it goes all the way into the northern hemisphere of the Earth, what we call the northern hemisphere of the Earth. It goes up to what we call the Tropic of Cancer. From there, it has to go all the way, 6 months, it has to travel all the way to the other end, the Tropic of Capricorn, in the so-called southern hemisphere. And it passes through the equator again. And so there are 4 tropical points which make the Holy Cross of Christianity, because this is the true Christian science. It's based on, that's what the Christian cross is, with the circle on it. It's the year, it's the ecliptic, the sine wave. And the cross gives you the tropical points, the equinoxes, and the solstices. So you start at March the 21st, everything begins there. Even astronomy starts there, at right ascension of meridian, Ram, in the sign of the Ram, Aries. So isn't this an interesting coincidence? We have the Lamb of God, where the sun begins its journey every year on the 21st of March, and that's when the astrological year as well begins. And so it goes around this circle and makes a cycle, same word. And as it does that, it creates a yearly pattern called the seasons. Spring, first season. Summer comes on after the solstice of June 21st. Then autumn after the equinox of September. And then winter. And during that year, many things happen to you and I and everyone, and the sun and the earth. Changes happen within the year. And there's many stories to be told, you see. That's why at Christmas we burn the log and we get together with our families, and because we recall the year that is gone, you see. Because that's another place where the year ends as well, in Capricorn at the solstice. It's always the goat and the sheep, Capricorn and Aries. Always. They are the two, you could say, beginning points of all stories. Okay, because they are the natural place for the sine wave to start, either at the center of the sine wave where it's neutral in Aries, or at the wave amplitude in Capricorn. So the year tells a story, and that's how all stories are made, by the sun going around the ecliptic. It is the gospel writer. All the gospels are in the ecliptic. That's why Christians to this day, they have Easter in Aries and they have Christmas in Capricorn. To this day, they still honour the true science of Christianity. But then, again, you get your Pentecostals and your born-again Christians who will say, oh, that's Catholic and they introduced pagan teachings. That's why Christmas and Easter, that's all pagan. Well, again, brainwashing. What does pagan mean? It just means country dwellers. Pagans are Christians. They're also Jews. There's Islamic pagans. They're just the ones who don't bother to go to the city where the universities are to learn how the city dwellers teach Christianity. Whereas the pagan, the farmers who didn't have enough money to travel into the city every day to go to church and had their own Christianity, they were condemned. See, so first of all, the word pagan they're using is totally a misnomer. And they've been brainwashed because, you know, they think that none of their story is only the only story and it's unique. Whereas if you do comparative studies, which you're not encouraged to do when you're in a denomination, then you'll find that everybody else has the same story. And the God that they worship just has a different name, but it's the same archetype, and it all comes from the sun on the ecliptic. So to answer your question, the overarching, fundamental story is the sun on the ecliptic, because you can get more information from that sine wave than you can get from smaller sine waves. If you're going to sit there with a microscope and look at all the atoms and trying to get information from the vibration in the atoms, which is a sine wave, a torus field, well then you'll be there forever. That's why what I've done in my presentations, every time I do an astrotheology presentation, I start with the equator, Tropic of Cancer on top, Tropic of Capricorn below, the ecliptic of the sun, put in the 12 signs, the 12 months, along the ecliptic, tell the story and show you how Snow White, Humpty Dumpty, Little Red Riding Hood, Robin Hood, King Arthur, Jesus, Osiris, Horus, Quetzalcoatl, Buddha are all on that ecliptic. And unless you know this, you know nothing. You'll forever be in ignorance. You will never know the truth. That's the secret of all things, right there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have an interesting question that always perplexes me. So in the fairy tales, there is always an evil queen and a curse. So how does that part of the fairy tale relate to what you're talking about?
Okay, well, Cinderella and her evil stepsisters and her evil stepmother. Well, the cinder is the sun because it makes cinders, okay? And Prince Charming is the moon. It is the charming one. It charms you, or Claire de la Lune in the midnight, you know, the moon and her charming. That's Prince Charming. And so Cinderella doesn't like her stepsisters, the clouds, nor does she like the winter, nor does she like the nighttime, you see? And the nighttime is the evil one. The clouds who stop the rays suns growing our beautiful chlorophylled vegetables and fruit. You see, they are enemies of the sun, Cinderella. And only Cinderella can be Prince Charming's consort, not the twin sisters. They're just a bunch of clouds. They're just some bad seasons, winter, the rain, the storms, you know. Only the moon and the sun can dance together at night like they do in glory, at the same size. You see, Cinderella's shoe only fit Cinderella because it's the moon and the sun are the same size. No one can usurp Cinderella from Prince Charming, you see. And midnight, why you turn into pumpkins is because at midnight, that's when Saturn is in his glory. Saturn is black, the god of darkness, known as Satan, evil, right? So, again, Eve eats the apple. Snow White eats the apple. The apple is the apple of Apollo, the Taurus field. When you eat an apple, you are an apple. Your body is the apple, the big apple, because that's why you have an apple core, a corazon. Your heart core is the apple core, and you are the apple. So when you eat of the apple, yes, you fall, because now you have a physical body in temporal, mundane existence, whereas before you were in your glory, unconditioned. Why did you take these conditions? Why did you fall? Why did you eat the apple? Why were you seduced by the serpent? The serpent is the sine wave, the Taurus field. You see? Mm-hmm. And so all of Snow White is the sun. The seven dwarves are the seven colours of the electromagnetic spectrum which the sun blesses us with, which creates the seven electricities which energize all the world. The purple, the violet, the indigo, the blue, orange, red, green, yellow, all these colours, they all vitalize certain fruits, certain vegetables, certain organs of your body, certain parts of creation. And all together, they all, you can compress the rainbow and it will be the sun. The sun uncompressed, you could say, in a sense, is the rainbow. It's Noah and his ark, the arch of the rainbow. That's why he got the rainbow, because Noah is the sun, and the ark is the degrees of ark which he travels on with his seven other co-inhabitants of the ark, which are the seven dwarves of Snow White, and they make 8. And 8 is that magical number of every ark, because as you go around the wheel and you put 8 spokes in the wheel, you have your tropical points and your cross-quarter days. And that's Noah's ark. And astrology is a science because we deal in degrees, minutes, and seconds of ark, of Noah's ark, or the Ark of the Covenant of Moses. That's all it is. The Bible's pure astrology. It's the most poetic and beautiful book of astrology in existence. It's not a book of doctrines. It appears to be that way. That's the way it's been redacted for the purpose of the elite mind control program, because now they have a playbook. Now they've got an Armageddon and a great tribulation that they've indoctrinated Christians to wait for, and is shaping up to happen, because they're actually making it happen, because they know that it is the Armageddon in one sense, because Christ is returning. The Son is bringing back new DNA and upgrading humanity's DNA and consciousness as we speak. But the satanic Luciferians, they're busy on the other side creating their transhumanist model of how God is going to transhumanize us, which is our higher selves. And we are doing this to ourselves. We are transforming ourselves. That's why we put ourselves under this pressure to come here. You ask the question, how did we get here? Well, there's 2 ways according to ancient Egyptian wisdom in the Hermetica. The Hermetica says there are 2 ways. Some people are punished here, and others come willingly to help those who are being punished. And so what happens is when they come, the prophets, and try to help people to get out of their darkness, out of their Platonic cave of the nymphs, they stone you to death. That's why Plato said, difficult it is to find the truth of the true God, and dangerous it is to publish. You get stoned for that stuff. You know, I'm getting stoned every day by people. You know, they wish death upon me, because here I am showing them how beautiful and universal their religion really is. It's not so compartmentalized, and it's not so supremacist as you think it is. It's actually quite the same as everybody else's. And until we realize that God is in all things that are conscious, that is, then we'll realize that our brothers over there in Thailand who are Buddhists, and over there in Arabia that are Muslims, actually are reading the same books. It's just in different languages, and it's just from a different sort of a perspective. But they are all telling the same story, and you can't deny that. Anyone who denies that is just sitting there looking like an idiot, because there's more than enough evidence, and all you have to do is read books to find that out. So easy. Comparative studies. You know, how can it hurt you to know something? It hurts them because they want to protect their lie. And that lie is that they are killing Christ, crucifying him daily by not accepting Christ, the higher individuality. They're stuck with their personalities and they love it. You know, they think being a doctor is the bee's knees, injecting children with big pharma. So the nursery rhymes aren't recognised as pertaining to nature, usually. People just know them as fanciful, you know, leftovers from antiquity, just funny little stories to entertain the mind, etc. No, everything is based in nature. Everything is, and it's all poetically describing nature's cycles. That's what the Gospels are all about. The Gospels are the same. That's why they're not histories, they're Gospels. A Gospel is absolutely not a history at all whatsoever. It's a story. Yeah, it tells you there that it's a fairy tale for adults. And that doesn't mean that it's empty of, void of goodness. It's full of goodness. It's just that in order to conceal and preserve universal truths, it was a device, you could say, or it is just the human way of conserving divine eternal wisdom within storytelling. And that is the best way to teach, because you can teach more truth through mythology than you can teach with all kinds of tech books full of history, data, facts, figures, and all of that. You can teach more truth with a simple sentence in mythological religious talk than in any other way. And that's why the Bible is so powerful, because it's not literal. It's literary. And hence it is hiding, it is veiling more levels of truth that you can never understand unless you realize that the Bible is a book of nature. And it's describing the phenomena of nature, which they call God, the demiurge, because that's nature. The supernatural God, well, that's source. That's Almighty God. But when you're talking about the Lord God and all of that, well, that's the demiurge. That's what people, in fact, it's Jesus. People don't realize that. It's the Son. The Son is the God of the material world. Simple, pure and simple. When you understand that, then you will absolutely understand how to, disentangle yourself from this web of conditions that you don't really enjoy, nor do you need, because you're of a higher substance than this substance. Mm-hmm. And that's what the calling is all about. There are those who are captive, those who are called, and those who are chosen. So we've all been called, Everyone gets a chance at being called. We came in captive because we were captive by the school system, the military, injected with vaccinations, told what to believe, read these books, read those books. Here's what the television says. And so that's the captive. We were caught, with a birth certificate, name, etc. But when you grow up, you realize and you're called. You get a spiritual calling. Now, to be chosen means quite another thing. The called and the chosen are two different castes of people. Yeah. And the chosen ones are the ones who have really chosen for themselves to live on the path, on the truth path, and not to waver, and not to serve any other gods, any other false gods, or make images, false images, and bow down to them. That would be all your Scientology, for instance, pseudoscience, all what the doctors tell you with their white coats and how they're going to treat your disease. Oh, yeah, they'll treat it all right. They'll never cure it, but they'll continue to treat it as long as you pay them. Oh, boy, they'll love it. Yeah. So, these are all frauds. Doctors are frauds, dentists are frauds. They're all frauds. They're big pharma pushers. The religions, they're all fraudulent. It's all satanic. And Satan, who is Satan? Well, Satan is Saturn, and Saturn has a job to do in the universe. Its energy is, it's of a perfecting nature. That's why he has the sickle. When you reap your harvest, you don't reap it when the grass is green. You wait for it to mature. Then you go out, you go to your shed, you grab your sickle, and you harvest that golden grain. It's the same with Saturn. Saturn is our harvesting, reaping, and he's harsh, you see. Whereas his opposite, the sun, Jesus and Satan, or Zeus and Saturn, that's what they are. See, one in astrology is the greater benefic, that's Jupiter, Zeus, the benefic, the benefactor of mankind, and he rules the baptism of water, and the baptism of fire. And then Saturn, the god of darkness, well, he rules earth and air. He's the ruler of the earth and he's in the air. And so it's the Saturnian negative energy that the elite are harvesting, and that is Satan.
Yeah.
Okay? They're not harvesting the good energy of Saturn.
Yes. Mm-hmm. They take it out of balance. Mm-hmm. And represent just that extreme end of it without any tempering of any of their energies. Mm-hmm.
Yes. They're clever. They know how to harvest all the awful parts of all the planets, including Jupiter. Jupiter, the greater benefic, and then Saturn is the greater malefic, and there's a war between them, and that war is the war of the individual and the personality. Okay, so the personality is connected to your left side, your masculine brain, the reasonable, rational, logical, and all of that stuff, right? Whereas the individual is hiding in the feminine right brain, the artistic God spirit being who is unconditioned and unlimited and has direct access to source should they want it, because that's what your individual is able of doing. The personality it's the prodigal son. It will keep you in this world of illusions because it wants, career titles. It wants to do activity in the world, which we don't. We're finished. We're done. I'm done. And by the way, if you know your astrology, you'll understand why I said that about Jupiter, Zeus, Jesus being, he's always connected with fire and water, yeah? Christians get baptized in water, then there's the baptism of fire. Well, that's Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius, fire, Cancer, water, and Pisces, water. And then Saturn rules Capricorn, earth, and Libra, air, and Aquarius, air. So you see, the Bible is correct when it says Satan is the ruler of the air and he is the ruler of the earth. The astrology teaches you the same thing. And then Jesus is the ruler of water, and fire, and you must have those baptisms. See, the water baptism is the illusionary one. It's not the real baptism, according to Plato and the Neoplatonists. They understood the baptisms. It was you see, that's why John the Baptist says to Jesus, the one coming will baptize with spirit and fire. So there's two more baptisms. There's one of spirit, which is air, pneumatic. The air element is called spiritus in Latin, same word. That's why when you inspire, that you are breathing air, which is in the word spirit, inspire, spirut, and expire. That pyre, that's the fire of spirit, and we breathe it in. And so all these baptisms are important. The first baptism is the one of earth, our bodies. To cleanse earth, you need water. Hence, you go to church, you get baptized in water. And that's where the churchgoers stop. They don't, well, you got your Pentecostals who say, oh, I've been baptized in spirit and I can speak in tongues, and I've been baptized in fire, but it's not from, it's not pure. It's not from pure source. Rest assured it's corrupted. Rest assured that God, the true magic that we find in the fire of astrology, the true fire, doesn't turn up in churches. Can do in individuals, but not as a church. It would never support a church, because churches are basically just institutions of mind control and dumbing people down spiritually, like the doctors do. They make people sick. Okay, so people are going to church and they're getting sick. The way to liberate them is through syncretism, astrology, herbs, nature, magnetism, understanding God, magnetism. God is magnitude, God is magnetism. That's what God is. And magnetism, see, people will get offended with this because they think that magnetism is it's just an energy. Nothing is unconscious, folks. Nothing. Energy is conscious, and that's God. And energy is everywhere. It's unlimited. Magnetism is everywhere. There'll never be a short supply. And it can run all of our machines, all of our technology with free energy. Nothing can stop magnetism, which is God. And that's why the churches are hiding that. They're hiding that God is actually just nature and magnetism so that they can run their electrical grid. And electricity really is the demiurge God. It's the God of polarity, red shift, blue shift, the transverse wave, the one that creates dimension, matter, material things. You see, the longitudinal wave of pulses and rarefactions, that's the true God. That is superior to the electrical God. And that one is called magnetodielectricity. We're still in the world of electromagnetism. It's inferior to magnetodielectricity.
Okay, yes. Okay, I can relate to that, yes.
Yeah, in my presentations in the playlist called All is Atum, you can learn about this. You can learn about how there are three energies and they are all one. It's the Trinity of God. That's why the Trinity, the God is one, but God is three. And this is why people will argue that till the day they die, and they'll never understand what they're arguing about. They're arguing about the etheric field, the ether. The ether is where all phenomena comes from. Mm-hmm. Light, sound, everything. And it is dielectric. And it is also magnetic, the yin and the yang, white and black light. White light is moving, black light is resting. Dielectricity is resting. It is the principle of inertia and acceleration, whereas magnetism is the opposite principle, force and motion. It's feminine. The feminine energy, magnetism, is force and motion. Magnetism actually means that in Sanskrit. Mag means to move. So magnetism means to move. It is motion. It is the rotating electromagnetic magnetic field. And so these two principles, force and motion, and its opposite, inertia and acceleration, produce a sun, a third part of the matrix, and that is electricity. And electricity is a transverse wave. It goes in perpendicular to the longitudinal pulse. Therefore, it is inferior. And that perpendicular action causes redshift, then blue shift. And that will give you everything that exists. The rainbow is redshift, blue shift. Your torso, top chakra, blue. Bottom chakra, red. The torso, Taurus, same word, body that you have, knows about redshift, blue shift. And so once you understand this, that the Taurus field is all about redshift, blue shift, magnitude and life and form, then you will understand everything. All is atom, all is atomic, atoms are Taurus fields. So when you look at the galaxies, you'll see Taurus fields. When you look at cosmoses, you'll see Taurus fields. Your body has an aura around it. Well, that aura is a Torah. Just put a T in front of it. And then you'll see you have a Taurus field. That's why you have a torso. That's why you have a thoracic cage. That's Thor. Thor is another way of saying Jupiter Zeus. The Arthur has 12 knights. Jesus has 12 disciples. Discs. So it's the same thing. It's everywhere you go, it's the same thing. It's Jupiter, the god of 12ness. You see? Mm-hmm. Jupiter is, Zeus is the leader of the 12 Olympians. Saturn is the leader of the 7 Titans. Yeah. And that's the war, and that's astrology. Okay, Mount Olympus is the astrological chart, and the 7 Olympians. Sorry, I said that back to front. I knew I was saying something wrong. Zeus is the god of the 7 Olympians. Saturn is the god of the 12 Titans, and the 12 Titans are 12 signs of the zodiac, and the 7 visible planets are the Olympians who fight on Mount Olympus. Just as Jesus stands on the Mount of Olives. Olympus, olives, it's all the same story. There's only one story. It's the ecliptic, the sun on the ecliptic. That's why it says in the Bible that the sun is preaching the good and acceptable year of the Lord. And it's the year, you see. Mm-hmm. Year is short for Yaram, the Proto-Germanic word for year. Yaram, Jaram, the ram. It starts in Aries and it ramps up to the Tropic of Cancer and it ramps down, and everywhere that ram goes. See, Mary had a little lamb. Mary is Mars. The lamb is Aries. Mars is the ruler of Aries. And everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. And its fleece was white as snow. Yes, the blossom in spring, when Aries turns up every year, it's as white as snow. In fact, it looks like the field is in snow. So that's why Mary had a little lamb.
Yes, very nice. That makes me smile. I like the message that you're giving us here about how if we are interpreting these stories as historical, literal, and arguing over whose story is correct, as you said, that people don't realize they are slighting themselves from having a deeper relationship with an esoteric experience. And so that message is important, and it is also a unifying factor for people to understand. In regards to also the reincarnation process, would you say that with the insertion of these falsehoods over the true story, is that a reason where as you explained, that there is a different level of experience that people aren't exactly making it to because of the fact that they don't understand there's a different level to go to.
Look, the level will be congruent. The level of teaching will be congruent to the capacity of the individual. So if the individual is trusting of his pastor and his church, and he doesn't have the capacity to read the scriptures correctly, well, then he's going to stay in that. Some people, unfortunately, you just can't, you cannot teach them a new thing. Mm-hmm. I think, I don't know, I hope they're in the minority, but they will trust their churches, and their churches will say, no, everything in the Bible is pertaining to history. It's all history. Because, yes, there are some historical facts that were inserted. It's a device to pin the Gospels to your period of history. So the Romans, they got pre-existing Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, who've been around for thousands of years prior to the Roman Empire. Gospels have always been around. And the Romans just said, well, okay, let's put this in here. Let's put Caesar Augustus declares a decree, and Mary and Joseph have to go to Bethlehem to register their Jesus boy under the, that was under the reign of Augustus, the piece of the Pax Domini of the Roman Empire. And so they insert these things, and they've Romanized those four Gospels, you see. And so now people, that's it, they've bought it. They really believe that Jesus is a historical figure, and just the way the Romans created their state religion of tax collection. So now they've got a very, very fundamental understanding of Christianity, which would be like a child who believes in Santa Claus. Mm-hmm. It's a Santa Claus Jesus. It's not real at all. The only Jesus that ever exists is the demiurge, and he exists in the planets. That's Jesus. He's the Archangel Michael of all the planets. He rules them all. Saturn is Archangel Ariel. Mars is Samael. So Cassiel is Saturn, Ariel is Jupiter. But it doesn't matter, because all the different lists have different names for them. But that is who Jesus is, the Son of God. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And so what they're not understanding now is they're not understanding that Jesus is in nature, and it's the demiurge. And the Son will save us, because we can be saved in this world through Jesus, which is through, mastering our lower nature. That's all it means, because Jesus is in the nature. So we use Jesus, for instance, we use him through, let's say, through Jupiter in the chart, or Venus, or the moon, because they are all aspects of Jesus, the demiurge, ruler of this world. Yes. And this is why people so fear astrology, because it is connected with the demiurge, of course, because it is the science of the demiurge, which is nature. But see, they believe that their God has nothing to do with nature. Nature is evil. It's disgusting. Their God is supernatural. He is a personality. He's an energy. He's God. He's bearded. He sits on a throne, and he's separate from this world and nature and the planets. And no. Mm-hmm. That's God the Father, you see, but they are one. They are one. As we respect the natural world, we respect the supernatural world. They are one and the same.
Yes.
Yeah. And the ones that give praise to the gods, so they have an altar to Jupiter or Venus, whatever is the chart ruler, and my chart ruler is Jupiter, so I need to do obeisance to Jupiter. I need to be Jupiterian. I need to be magnanimous. I need to be generous. I need to be a teacher, a role model. That's what the Jupiterian hero is all about, to save others and not just themselves. Just as Hercules Ulysses, when he returned to Penelope, he returned as a Neptunian hero, and which is the hero who saves their lives but cannot save others. His friends were turned into swine by Ceres, and so he had to leave them behind, and showing that he was not fit to save others. But a Jupiterian hero, which I intend to be, saves others. And how do you save others? By, warning them, look, you're walking towards a cliff. Don't go straight. Turn right here. Otherwise you'll fall. Right? That's what I'm doing. I'm showing people where the cliff is in their teachings, and they will be saved. It doesn't mean I saved them. It means they were saved by what the universe provided for them at that time. And in that case, it happened to be my voice. But I'm not speaking for myself. I don't speak for myself anymore. I've left my personality. As the scripture says, put on the new personality of God. Do away with the old personality. Do away with it. Kill the old personality of the flesh, who wants to drink and eat and thinks only of what the dogs and the cats think about,
Mm-hmm.
Survival.
Mm-hmm. Okay, beautiful. And so the unfortunate events that have taken place, as you're speaking, and we use the words moon and Saturn, and you talked about Prince Charming being the moon and then the dark side of Saturn, and what happens also, let's say on the spiritual end with some is that people take the word Saturn, the planet Saturn, and they immediately totally refer to it as being negative only. And that is also another part of what we need to come away from. Just because it's been used that way, it's still everything is neutral until how you are utilizing it. And utilizing it just comes in different dark, and what we'd say dark and light and good and evil ways that we can use the energy. So as it's being expressed, it's just that type of expression, but it can always be neutral. So for example, in numerology, something that I'm finding is that a lot of the old teachings, for instance, would take the tarot, in the tarot, the tower card is the 16-7 in numerology. And going through a 16-7 period of time, everyone panics and doesn't want that tower to come along. And because of the very heavy dialogue that's been written about it. So there's a lot of fear into it. And I think people fulfill their fears more and their old patterns and habits in that time frame that comes, as opposed to looking at it as a grand opportunity. So for us to remove some of these dialogues that have been placed on how these energies are going to happen in a negative effect, but look at all energies that we're moving through is simple potential, that there's not really anything negative to move through in a sense, say upcoming. It may be a challenge, but the more that we take ourselves out of that binary thinking that we've been talked into and open up the true potential in there, I like to draw in that energy that's not on paper. What do I need? Some people just focus too much on what is on the paper, say in a chart, whether it's astrology or numerology. But I like to look at, what is the tempering energy that we need to bring into there? So let's not focus on what a potential period of challenge is going to be, because you're feeling it as having happened potentially before within you in some past space, but open up that opportunity for what we can bring to it, if that makes sense to you there. So it's all part of changing these old dialogues that have been placed on these neutral energies. It's all neutral energy to utilize into any end of the spectrum. And of course, certain energies, as the numbers go along, the one appears to be in conflict with the two, but it's just that it's that force of between the two energies because they're differing. But if we draw in what's ever needed to the equation to soften that transition, and I think that's what we're going through right now in the world, we really need to use as much new thought frames about anything that we're moving through, open up that potential for a peaceful energy to come in and help us through the conflicts that are coming in. So as you were talking, I mentioned the moon. There's our people who talk about the moon as being a structure that wasn't here before, that it's been pulled in, possibly it came in through when it was either towed in. It's an artificial structure that is controlling us. Now, you've talked about in your studies, you've taught how the stars that we see in the sky and the planets are not, have you put it in terms of they're not solid, they're luminescent beings, as opposed to what we are thinking that we can travel to them and be on them and go upward to get to them. You've talked about having planes of reality. So this can kind of move us into your current feelings about flat Earth. So can you talk about those different theories and ideas you have about what the stars and the planets are in the sky and our different planes of reality? Say, where is true Mars on the plane of reality at?
Well, they're all planes of existence. There are 7 of them under the firmament. Now, Ptolemy, I'm a Ptolemaic astrologer, and his beautiful geocentric Earth astrological model was fit for thousands of years for every culture prior to the Jesuit Copernicus. And he there describes the firmament just as the Bible describes it, very, very, very clearly. It is a firmament in the sky, which is an enclosed system. They tell you that. Even the astronauts tell you cannot escape Earth's atmosphere. It's a closed system. I've heard an astronaut say that. It's online. And so the 7 below that firmament, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Moon, Mercury, Moon, in that order, they are all concentric planes of existence, like a Russian doll. Okay, now when people say that they are devices that are controlling us, they are telling you the truth, but only half the truth, because they really think in Copernican terms that the moon is solid and all of this is solid, whereas they're not. And Wikipedia will tell you clearly that Saturn and Jupiter are just balls of gas. Okay, so, when you look through a telescope at Mars, it's pretty similar to what you see when you see Jupiter and Saturn. They're just balls of gas, okay? They tell you that. They try to trick you thinking that Jupiter's terrestrial and Jupiter's just a ball of gas, which it is, ball of light. And so how clever, how clever. And the moon too. The moon is also supposedly, you can tell the moon's just a light. I mean, open your eyes, look at the moon, just watch it. You got to, people have got their nose down. They're just busy doing material pursuits. If you actually look at the moon, you'll discover that it's just a light, like the sun. It's helium and hydrogen. And so it's a ball of light. And so they are the central visual parts of their bodies that we can see with our limited sight, if you like. So, rather than trying to describe the bodies of these beings, they're all centered around the sun. And I suppose the twin of the sun, which is Saturn, they are the chief archetypes of the system. So the sun, I would say, is the lord of the universe. It has to be. And I think that the planets are just aspects of the sun. They have life by virtue of the sun. Without the sun, they don't exist. So I'm seeing the sun as central here, and the moon being the source of everything. The moon is dielectric light, the sun is magnetic. So you'll find that all of them act in harmony with dielectricity, magnetism, and electricity. The sun is magnetic. People will say, oh no, it's electric because it creates the electrical field that its corona mass ejections are traveling through. All right, that's electricity. Yeah, it is. It's electromagnetism, but it is a magnetic generator. It's a pulse perturbator. That's what the sun is. A pulse perturbator, you could liken that to throwing a stone in a still pond. Now you've created a pulse in the center, and it has perturbed the surface of the water. It's a perturbation. Well, the field of water and its waves is exactly how light waves travel through the ether. But we don't recognize the ether as a field. Well, we do recognize the air in which sound travels as a field. We do recognize water as a field, and humans can hear in water, albeit very, very, there's a lot of interference patterns in water because the sound travels a lot slower. So you won't hear, if someone says hello in the water, you will hear, oh, whoa, because of the interference patterns. But in the air, it's crystal clear. So light we think is traveling through the air, but that's not so. That's not the field of light. The field of light is the ether. And that's why we have an Ethernet cable connected to our computers, because it is Wi-Fi and Li-Fi and Ethernet are real things. And that is, and we don't see them. They're invisible. That's why this God subject is all about the ether. It's all about what is invisible. How come energy comes from nothing? Well, what they perceive to be nothing, it's not nothing, it's everything. And they can't understand that. How can energy come from counter space? Space is energetic, but space doesn't have its own energy source. The energy source is in counter space. And to us, that is nothing. So how can nothing make everything? But this is what we cannot grasp from here, our personalities. Our individuality can grasp that we are unconditioned in the counterspatial world where we are in our unlimited selves. So the science of astrology is basically the science of electromagnetism. But it's the same as the highest energy, which is magnetodielectricity. And they are two different ways of energy being transmitted. One is direct and one is indirect. That's it. The transverse wave is indirect, or it's got a dilation factor in it. Like if you get a tight rope, and you have two individuals pulling really tightly, and then one tugs that rope, you get the effect of the other guy feels it instantaneously. It's called instantaneous reaction at a distance, which quantum physicists can not even explain. Whereas, Ken Wheeler, in his YouTube channel, Theoria Apotheosis, he explains that it's magnetodielectricity. It's a pulse, and everything there is entangled. They talk about entangled particles and how a particle here can influence a particle on the other side of the universe. Well, only through the longitudinal wave. The transverse wave. Now, if you get that rope and you slack that rope, so now it's a wave and it touches the ground and it's really, really loose. Now what you do is you pull at that rope. Now, how long now does it take for your friend over on the other side to feel the tug? Well, there's a time delay. And that's because now we have some transverse interference in that rope. We've actually slackened it, and now we've got a perpendicular element component to it, and that's slowing it down. Now it's got the rope has to travel. It's longer. It's got to travel a lot, and it has to reach wave amplitude, and then there's little waves within waves inside of it, and so it's all creating interference patterns as well now, and harmonics within it. Whereas the pure energy, the virgin, Mary, our mother, magnetism, who is a virgin, white light, it doesn't vibrate. Snow White needs 7 dwarves to do its work. The demiurge, Snow White, can't do anything without redshift, blueshift. It needs the whole rainbow. You see? So white light is just, it's useless without creating that perturbation in the field of ether, which is the transverse wave. And then that's how everything inferior, that so-called inferior demiurgic world is created. The Sophia's mistake, the blasphemy of this material world ruled by Satan. Yeah, the gospel teaches you the same thing that philosophy will teach you. Saturn, old man time, is the ruler of the world. He makes time and he swallows it up, just like Krishna says, time I am. So you have in every religious field that the great Lord of the universe is called time, and his partner is called space, magnitude, chronos, time, and area of space, time and space. And they have a child called Zeus, Jupiter Zeus, Jesus, the Son of God. And now he is the God of form. His other name is Jupiter, or Tor, as in, the day, Thor's day, Thursday, Tor, okay? Jupiter is Tor, and that's the Taurus field. And the Taurus field is the form, that's the demiurge, the God of form. And he is one with Rhea, his mother, area, space, and his father, Kronos, Saturn, time. So we live in a temporo-spatial form. That's the point of the Trinity. The Trinity is time, space, form. The neutron, the electron, the proton. Dielectricity, magnetism, electricity. Krishna, Radharani, Balaram, Belectricity. The third guy has always got an L in his name, electricity, inferior energy, but one and the same with the Father. It's of the same field. It's just inferior, it's transverse, it decays. Radio waves decay. If you're driving in the city and you're listening to your favourite station and you're having a good time and your home's out in the country, well, between there and home, what starts happening is the songs start getting crackly. Well, that's because the wave, the transverse radio wave, decays. You see, its father, the longitudinal scalar wave, never decays. It's pure. And it's the source of all energy. And that's God. It's intelligent and it's unlimited. And we are of it.
Absolutely. And just a brief answer on this, out of curiosity, and maybe for those who are listening and who are first kind of grasping that the moon is a light and not an object that can be landed on. So we are being told about Mars being populated and that there will be traveling to Mars in the future. And as well, there has been information that you also have listened to, that there are jump gates to the moon. So, people like Laura Eisenhower and such, as they were children, they were describing that they were using jump gates, technology in order to travel to the moon and to Mars, and have potentially said they've remote viewed. And when I listened to you, I thought, well, they believe they're going into the sky, but they're probably moving to a different plane of reality as opposed to an object in the sky. would that be how you would interpret that? And are you feeling that, let's say that there is an ice wall around us right now, and there are lands on the external sides of this ice wall, this ring that we're in? And would you say that there are more advanced civilizations that are being traveled to through jump gates, or areas where there's travel in between already?
Yeah. Those guys, they're telling you the truth. They have been to a place which is called Mars, but it's not the planet in the sky. It's not that light that they've gone to. They've gone to. There are other lands that are not visited by humans, and we're not allowed to go there. So some of those are, as you said, beyond Antarctica. Sir Captain George Hubert Wilkins, a colleague of Admiral Byrd, he logged in his logbook, he went to Antarctica, and he said he travelled 5,000 miles with an aeroplane, beyond Antarctica and discovered many lands. Okay, so that's one possibility where they've been going to beyond. Somehow they've been able to penetrate the Van Allen belt, which is what Eisenhower was talking about, these portals. They're everywhere, these portals, and they know how to get through them and go beyond Antarctica. But I suspect that these Mars and Moon places that they go to are under the Earth. There are 7, according to the Hindu texts and the Mayans, and even the Hebrews, there's a place called Sheol under the earth, and there are 7 planes there as well below the earth. And that's where hell, or what they call hell, is where it is, if there is such a thing as a physical location for hell. I believe hell is a condition. Secondarily, it's a location because you can suffer the condition of hell here on earth, as some people like to do. They're living in hell, but for others it's paradise. So they've brought the condition into the location, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Yeah. So what they've brought to below the earth, which is hell, they have brought luxury, more luxury than on the earth plane, but more suffering. And as you go higher, so you can go to the moon as a rishi, as a spiritual individual. Yes, you can go to the moon, but not as an astronaut physically. But you can live on the moon. You can. And it is because it's a plane, like our planet of the earth. It's a material plane here. It's terrestrial, whereas the moon is not. But you can live on the moon, you can live on Mercury, you can live, I should say. All the Neoplatonists, all the Hermetists spoke about this. All the religions, they all teach this. They are higher planes of existence where there is less luxury, less luxury and less suffering. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's all about eliminating the suffering. When you go into meditation, trans-meditation or whatever, why? Because you want to escape this suffering, don't you? You want to go and find the beautiful world that lies within. And so that's how we get to those planes. But it's not necessary to go and live on the higher planes here in this cosmos. You can go beyond. You can actually, in one lifetime, you can ascend that much that you can actually go to what's called Vrindavan. And Vrindavan is where you live with God as either a husband or wife, a sister or brother, or a mother or father. They are the 3 highest forms of love that you can express toward your higher self, God. As a husband or wife, brother or sister, or mother or father. Below that, there are 2 other forms of love and worship. And please don't think of any conventional ways of using these words that I'm using, please. I'm a philosopher, I'm a syncretist, okay? I've reclaimed these words because they are valid, but they need to be understood correctly. Now, so what was I saying? What was I getting to?
Validating the words of worship and the second type of love.
Okay, there's 5 loves. The 3 highest and sublime loves I've described. Below that, you have what's worshipping Vishnu, not Krishna, and that is where you worship a god on a throne, where you revere God, like just revere your higher self and honor your higher self, because ultimately that's what it is. And they are the worshipful type of individuals. They like to go to that plane. And then below that is the neutral, which is called the Brahmajyoti or the Brahmananda. And that's where you show a neutral love to God, which some suspect to be the highest form of love that you can have for your highest self. No neutral, no action. It's a place of inactivity, but you are blissfully one with yourself and God at all times. Whereas the planes, the loves above that neutral plane, they have activity. And that's where I'm striving to go. I don't want to go to the Brahmajyoti because I don't like inactivity. I want to be active forever. And so you can escape all of these beautiful planes of existence. There's many, many planes. That's why Jesus said, in my Father's house there are many mansions. I'm going my way to prepare one for you. So you can go wherever you want, wherever you wish, and you will go according to the currency of your soul. You see, when you travel to another country, you can't bring your dollars. You have to change to rupees or euros. You have to have their currency. So when you disincarnate, you have died and moved on from this body, and you have experienced what they call death, which is just door to the ether, door, death. And so you are now going back to the ether, and what you have practiced in your life will be your currency. So as the Egyptians show in the underworld, Mentet, they show Osiris the father with Horus the son, and the son is interceding on behalf of the deceased as they weigh their heart against the feather on the scales. And if the heart is too heavy, then Horus intercedes. And that is how we are saved, through the Son, because the Son can make a concession and the Father will accept it. So it's a system of salvation whereby the torus fields can be regenerated back into the counterspatial world, and you can live back there again. You don't perish in torus fields in the material world. You don't have to stay here. You don't have to be trapped in prison planet. You don't have to be a slave. You can regenerate and be saved through the sun, through the torus field. Because in the torus field inside, there's what's called the hyperbola. And Bol is Baal, the god Baal. And B becomes a P. So that's where the phallic is. Phallus and Palus and Baal are all the same word, and it's the obelisk type phallic part of the torus field, the hourglass part in the center of the torus field. That is the symbol of time, Chronos, and it is Baal. And so that torus field is both the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. So knowledge is the same as carnal knowledge. You see, when Adam knew Eve, they begat Cain. So how is it that when Adam knows Eve, they have a child? Well, because to know and carnal are the same root word. Hence, when you eat of the tree of knowledge, you have a carnal body. You have a torso field. Now, to eat of the tree of life is the other part of the hyperbola, which is blue shift, left turning, convergent centripetal magnetism. Then you will lose the torus field and you will escape and go back to cause. Okay?
Interesting. Very nice. I appreciate also when you use the words that implied that with this type of information, we don't have to take on the theory within us that this takes a long time to accomplish. Like sometimes people say you just have to live so many lives. And sometimes I think that there's a bit of, misinformation placed in their references to how many lifetimes, because it seems to me that with proper information and understanding that we could go through our changes here, our transmutations, and understandings, learning about the physical plane here, and return a lot easier without, that level of getting trapped here.
Oh, you can do it in a split second if you know how to, and if you're worthy.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that just feels more real to me, and it sort of grates on me a little bit when I hear someone proclaim that, oh, you have to have all these different lifetimes and you have to come back and you have to do this and you have to do that. And I think, I don't know, from from how I'm feeling about it with the right information and from some stories that I had read one time, and whether it was real or not, it expressed, it was either Lyrians or Lemurians, I think it was Lyrians, that they would come in and basically they would complete a lot by a very young age, and somewhat after, maybe even their late teens, before 20, they would go back to the more spiritual planes after that, because they would accomplish a lot more here and have experiences here. And I thought, well, that's kind of an interesting way to think about it.
Yes, they are correct in general. That's a general truth. You do have to come back many times, because for how intelligent we are, we do have a lot of stupidity to shed as well. I know I do. I see my stupidity on a daily level, and I also see the intelligence that is available to me. That's a field of intelligence, and I accept it as well as my saviour. So if we accept Jesus' intelligence as our saviour, we will acquire the worthiness and the ability through that worthiness to know how to escape this world, just instantly. We can just, this is how you get people who combust, the automatic combustion. They're gone. And so that is the ability we once used to have. And see, that is the beautiful. That is the beautiful salvation that Jesus has offered us. If you want to return to cause, you will be saved through this torus field. Don't fear. Okay, you ate the apple and you are sinners now, and now you're in this material world where you suffer decay, as all waves do. Like radio waves. They start off fresh and then they get all crackly. Well, look at little children, nice and fresh, very juicy little plump cheeks, and then when you get to the later end of your life, it's all sort of like a wrinkly prune. It's all dried up. So that is the only sin that we're experiencing, that process of death, and how to conquer it. Well, it's easy. You just accept the truth of how nature works. Jesus will save you. The torus field will save you. Electromagnetism will save you if you understand how to sublimate it, how to sublimate that energy. When you learn how to manipulate energy, you become the magician, the initiator, you become the Christ. You become conscious and self-aware and self-determined. You become God. You have to just get to understand electromagnetism.
Yes. And then that we have our choice to come in and out as often as we like and come back and experience, and just have a little bit more understanding that we are choosing to come back and we can complete lessons here and leave or come back again. So a little bit more, of a reference than a heavy burden that sometimes some dogmas are placing on us. Now, your theories in flat Earth and fitting into and as you bring syncretism in, which states that our information has all been altered, and then fitting your theories into the current information that's coming forward about our timelines being altered. And have you moved your information in, and in regards to the theory of a mud flood potentially that we are seeing now in, I think it's this Sylvia, is it Sylvia Ionova of New Earth?
Yes, doing a great job there. Yeah, she's spot on. They are spot on. There was an induced flood in the 1800s, definitely, probably 1850. 1812 is when they really started kicking in this demonic New World Order. I believe that Tartaria was the 1,000 years of peace that when Satan was bound in Revelation. And I believe we are now living in the short time that Satan has been loosed to see if he can deceive even the chosen ones. So, yes, this is a satanic Nephilim stock of entity that has come in. And this is why some people say that, the moon is this device. It has been hijacked. Yes, the moon has been manipulated. That's all it is, manipulation. But it's not as they describe it. And they've got, plants on there and they've got people walking around on there. That's absolutely not true. That's misinformation. But the timeline, what they did was, rather than we had 1,000 years of the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, we actually had 1,000 years of peace. And they came along. Everything started with the Jesuits in the 1500s. Then the bad turn of events occurred in 1773. They were outlawed by Pope Clement XIII. So in the meantime, the Americans got very busy and wrote their Articles of Confederation, Bill of Rights, Constitution, and within 3 years, without the Jesuits on American land or active legally on American land, they started a republic of sorts. And so it was different to the other mafia on the continent. So what they did was they basically created a whole new concept where you could, live in a republic and be free for those who wished to be. Of course, that was not offered to everybody. This is the thing with the Constitution and everything. Some people don't even wish to have, those rights. They just don't. They're not that way inclined. But the point was, that's when everything started, because this aggravated the Jesuits for 3 years. They came back in 1776 when they founded the Illuminati. This is when all of these mud floods and all of these disasters really started to happen, I believe. The Jesuits geared up then in 1776 with the Illuminati, took over all the Freemasonic lodges. Now they are controlled at the high end, and also doing the work of this satanic New World Order. And so what they did in 1812, the Rothschilds convened all the kings and leaders of all the nations, including the Romanovs of Russia, to the Council, the Congress of Vienna, to try to establish the first League of Nations / United Nations. And they failed because Russia and the Romanovs saw what they were trying to achieve and didn't want to have a bar of it. So that's when Nathan Rothschild promised that he would get his vengeance, which he did exactly about 100 years later in the Bolshevik Revolution. Now, In the meantime, we had the French Revolution, 1789. We had the American. We had even the 1812 war in America as well. And what they did was basically they just they took over all the ancient buildings that were there from the old world, and the families of the conquistador families of Europe basically just occupied all the buildings, called this one a bank, that one a treasury, this one a hotel, and their names are still on those buildings which they didn't build, and which they just occupied. See, what they are is they're just they've occupied Christianity. Once Christianity, Tartaria was Christian. It was a Christian empire in the sense that it was the true Christianity, that it was philosophical, and it was teaching the science of light, which is all Christianity is, right? So these elite families, they destroyed it with their mud flood. And I also believe they also jumped the timeline as well in around about 1904 or 1905. But I really think that most of all of the mud flood was in the 1850s, 60s, and 70s.
Okay, and so in our flourishing in the golden ages, and I definitely believe that. I feel it in my heart. I always resonate with that time frame. I feel like I've come directly from that time frame. I think, I remember in dreams when I first had awakenings that there was I was being taught in a schoolroom, and I sometimes thought it was maybe I was coming from a different plane of reality before coming back into here. But I think that, some of us were preparing to, be incarnated again here into the future, and to remember, because I remember saying, oh, I'll remember. And, so many people who are here have a different feeling completely about how reality could be functioning. And so I definitely believe in that time frame, and another reference is, of course, that there was free energy. And so we were working with, as you said, they've uncovered high technologies. So when you say that the floods were induced and that they were jumping timelines, are you talking about technology that may have been used that induced them? And are you referring to that potentially as being purposeful in order to cause enough chaos so that they could come back in, similar to some of the tactics that are happening now? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. What they did was they appropriated themselves of the old world buildings after they destroyed everything with plague, mud floods, technology. They would have just wiped out certain individuals, like they're trying to do with RFID chipping now. They're trying to do the same thing where they can just, all the undesirables, they just hit a button and out, and then start again with all these reprogrammed, dumber, educated people who are dumb. And that's what education's all about, dumb you down. And so what they would have done was they would have used the flood technique, they would have used war, technology, plagues, and what they did, so they saw that Tartaria was using magnetism, and they realized that you can't charge magnetism. You can put a meter on electricity, though, because it's a transverse wave, you see, and it's limited.
Yes, I see.
Yep, so all of those buildings with towers that would harvest or let's say dielectric energy into their buildings and giving free energy to all the towns and the communities, what they did was they just turned these now into cathedrals and places of worship, etc. And they would have disconnected a few stones here and there in the masonry of the building so that it wouldn't channel that good energy and work magnetically. And then they set up the electrical grid. They took a good 100 years to set up the grid which you can pay for. So they really did just created, from paradise, we went to slavery instantly, almost overnight.
Oh my, yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense. It feels so spot on real, because the memories of living life so differently, you know, are so familiar for so many. And when you say then that they jumped the timeline in, was it 1904? You referenced it. And how are you saying that you feel they jumped the timeline? As in a reset? So the use of a type of CERN?
Yes, I should use better the word reset. Yes, in the early 1900s, they tried to create disasters all around the world, especially Russia. They burned down factories with bombs. They bombed Russia everywhere so the Tsar would crumble, because the Tsar was pretty much, America, Russia, and Germany were the last bastions of sovereignty and real good Tartarian technology, which this new Illuminati Jesuit inquisitorial gang were trying to stop. You know, they tried to stop Fordism in America, you know, because this is what America was built on. It was built on making good things that last forever, so make people's lives comfortable and happy. That was the true American dream. Yes, it was materialistic, but it was a good material model, a very good material model.
Yes.
Yep. Yep. So they came along, and what they did was they did a reset somehow. Somehow they used this Zionist movement. They actually created it. The Jesuits did that. The Illuminati, Weiss helped, and all of that gang. They created this false Jewish thing now from a Khazarian stock of warriors and money dealers. And so what they did was they started destroying nations. Right, that's their goal, to destroy all religions and all nations, because nations have sovereignty. So they're trying to make a new world order by their various means and trickery. And so what they had to do was create now a sovereign state, which would be the new ruler. So Israel is pretending to be that. That's what I think the whole Israel thing is about. And they want to bring, the Pope wants to rule in Jerusalem. Everything wants to go to Jerusalem. Because why? Well, because Jerusalem is actually, when you look at the true geocentric model of the earth, you will understand that Jerusalem is a very important harmonic spot on the grid of the earth. It is Holy Land. There's many Holy Lands, but Jerusalem is a special Holy Land, and it's quite possible that some kind of restoration of Earth's magnetic grid will happen from there. That's why I'm thinking they're all waiting for this Meshach to come to Jerusalem, and they want him now. Because I think they're going to try and manipulate that new energy that's coming in. They know it's irresistible, and they know it, that the Christ is returning, free energy, freedom, self-determination, and they're just trying to work out how they're going to control it.
And their current answer to that is to bring in 5G, even though no one's asking for it, no one truly needs it, and it's seemingly coming in, you know, up against so many people disagreeing and going to their city boards, et cetera, and talking to them about it and saying, no, we don't want this. So, okay, yeah, I definitely can see that you put together so many pieces of the puzzle. I'm grateful, Santos. Thank you so much for coming back in here. We are probably within this second half here, approaching about a 2-hour show. So I don't want to ask for too much more of your time. So we can save the information if you would join me again sometime to talk about 5G and some solutions that we might be able to work through, what we might be expecting, what different type of neutralizing effects we can allow to come in, and use our will differently, and is where I like to end my how I'm taking back tacit consent and bringing in me living in universal law, and denouncing the man's laws that are being imposed as not being laws that I am subjected to, at least in my, subjective space of intenting that. And I think that's more usefulness and will that people need to become a little bit more informed about. I just want to say briefly, I was watching, I looked at many of the different posts that you've been posting recently, and one of them was on 5G in the community going, it probably was a secondary one-off from what you had posted, but it had people going before a board, and there happened to be a woman in the middle of the board listening, and they're on their raised platform up in front of the room. And as they were going through 30-second, they like each had some short amount of time that they were allowed to talk and present their case. And so as they were talking, I kept thinking, someone has to change the energy and how it's being spoken to these people in reference to ways that we are going to hold people responsible who sell us out. And in a sense of energetically. So this very last man comes up and he was saying to this woman, I want you to understand that I'm here talking with you, and I am clearly telling you that what you are potentially going to allow in our community here by your vote, even though we are completely against it, that we have all demonstrated here the significant dangers of what 5G is bringing in, because it is a weaponized system that is very harmful on very many levels. And he said, so I am saying to you that the universe is hearing that you have been informed of what decision you may potentially be making, and that you are informed. And I found that very powerful.
Yeah, beautiful. It is very powerful. So being informed is very, very important. I do have a lot to say about 5G because I have been experiencing, as a targeted individual, electromagnetic radio frequencies, microwaves for more than 10 years. But in the last 10 years, I've been tortured by these weapons. I know all about them, and I've only recently, in the last 6 months, really understood what part they have played in my health and everything that has happened to me in the last 10 years, and all the trouble I've ever gotten into, and all sorts of woeful, horrible things. The last 10 years, especially the last 7, have been absolutely cursed, the trouble that I've had. And I've been itching all the way through it. Burning skin, itching. This has been my torture.
Sure,
sleep deprivation.
Sure.
Now, I just want to say to folks, we're all subject to this. I am particularly, obviously, because of these reactions that I'm having to it, and I'm probably very sensitive to them. Others may not be, but I am to electromagnetic smog and frequencies. But we all are indirectly. But I think the first port of call would be to clean your body out, especially of parasites. So work on a parasite cleanse, because what happens is the smart dust and the nanobots and everything, they are designed to work with the parasites. And so when they turn up the frequencies, they usually do it when I just go to bed and lay my head, I start itching. This happens night after night after night. It's been happening for 10 years, destroying my peace. That is what happens, is they are agitating the parasites, and the parasites also start pooping and misbehaving. And that's why people are losing sleep, etc. Their GI tract is in turmoil. Well, if the more you get rid of the candida and the fungus and the parasites, the mold from your body, the better you will fare in the future, especially with
Yes, boy, I have been working as hard as I can to help people to understand that message. I completely feel that that's a large reason why people's health is deteriorating so much. And of course, so many more people are in front of, technology right now. And I do believe there is, even though 5G is rolling out, I believe there's a lot more that's been happening. That's something's already being used, and it's coming through the technology, and it is already affecting, like you said, individuals like yourself. I have listened to, her name is, you're probably familiar, Dr. Catherine Horton.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, so I'm a little bit familiar with her story and how she also was attacked, and because of her position that she had inside information. I think it was, she came off of CERN and had worked in that area, and then she wanted to get some information out, so she was being attacked and is still being attacked. But yes, those of us who are more sensitive to the frequencies here, but we're sort of, the thing is, we're working on a protocol to take ourselves out of this, but people who don't realize that this is taking place within them, they're already having I believe that's why we see additionally so many more, instances of failing health, especially, in our elderly and actually, children, everyone right now. So meaning that you may have had symptoms, I have symptoms, but because the fact that we are working on protocols, we're more perturbed and not as life-threatened. Does that sound appropriate? Or okay? So, and meaning that the people are being affected by it, maybe without having these other types of symptoms, which may even be more, in a sense, even lighter symptoms to a certain degree than the heavier life-threatening. But certainly myself, from being in front of the computer, I am working, I have my laptop hardwired and a hardwired keyboard and mouse to use to keep myself away. But I noticed specifically the level of health that went down in being in front of it so much. So I have to get back out to nature and change that. And but now, just to know, do you need to get going right now? And do you want to do an ending here? Yeah, because I've kept you long. And definitely if you would come back on again sometime, and we can talk about some other types of protocols and more about 4G. That's fascinating. And I think it's a topic that needs to be further reinforced. So Santos, will you give everyone your contact information and what services they could reach you for, as well as products that you have to offer?
YouTube channel is Mr. Astrotheology, one word. Please go to that channel. There are many playlists. There's so much information for you to be self-determined and to ascend. Lots and lots of information. I would recommend that first. Then I've got my website, universaltruthschool.com, Universal Truth School, one word. And there are ways you can support syncretism there. You can buy my 432 hertz flamenco albums. I've got 3 albums for sale: instrumental music, flamenco, Latin jazz. It's instrumental, no singing. That way, you know, you've got nice music and you're supporting syncretism. Or you can, I've got graphics there, astrological graphics. They're $20 each. They're digital. There's also, you can get a reading, you know, do your medicals. I can show you your medical composition, your medical nature, what are your weaknesses and strengths, etc., and point people into, you know, ways of healing that. So those are the services and those are the sites.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. As we are leaving here, I want to also say congratulations to you on your engagement. So to Violet. So beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes, very happy for you. You look wonderful. So keep up the great work. I look forward to hearing more all the time. I'm a little bit of a studyaholic myself, so I will be back on your site very many times again now. So thank you, Santos, and have a very beautiful rest of your day. Okay?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.